films for us to discuss, I happened upon it again and I watched it and I was just knocked out by it. Kimberly, welcome back. Always good to have you with us. And I wish I could have shown this before Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, not that it's a religious film, but it's all about guilt and forgiveness and self-forgiveness and trying to do the right thing while acknowledging that we are flawed people and that all humanity is flawed. And it talked around and into those subjects so well, I decided to program it because I realized it's such great filmmaking. I mean, are you aware that 95% of the time you only see him on the screen? Did anybody realize, but were you bored, Betty?
No, that's what I thought was so impressive, that they could, it was like edge of your seat, even though it was mostly just looking at him.
Okay, and why do you think that was?
You should tell us. I thought good filmmaking.
It is good filmmaking, but your reaction is more important than my guessing at what caused it, although I think I know. Okay, I won't press you. If anybody else want to chime in why that technique of showing mostly him worked for you? If it did, if it didn't, I'd love to hear it. Susie.
Well, I think that it was a movie that grabbed you, and he was such a good actor. He just really played the part. It was so believable. That's what drew me to not want to leave the film.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started it, I thought, oh my God, what did Jim give us tonight? This is really going to be a stretch. And then he just pulled me in, this actor. I thought it was really good.
Do you remember what pulled you in? What moment in the film did it? It's okay if you don't. It's very dense with phone calls.
Well, his relationship with the little girl,
okay.
Being a teacher of small children, that is a delicate issue, to get her to give him the information that he wanted. He was very, very delicate with her, gentle. For a big guy, he was good.
Mm-hmm. All right. Has anybody here ever seen a television show that's off the air but ran for about 20 years called Cops? It's an American reality show where the camera crew accompanied policemen, usually at night, as they encountered people doing bad things or people in trouble. And I learned from that show that policemen can be better and more thoughtful than we ever imagined. And this guy certainly was. You'll notice he wore a wedding band the whole time, but we learned that his wife left him, although he couldn't tell his partner that. And that he was seeing a psychologist, but that's getting ahead of the game. I bring up Cops because I think you don't just go from being a beat officer to the emergency services line. I think there was training involved. And maybe it's part of the same training when he goes on a field call to a domestic disturbance, like the one he picks up on. So I don't want to take away from his character, but I want to take off from that because, and this is true of police. The first phone call he gets is from the addict, the guy who took drugs, right? And he's so pissed off at Asghar, he hangs up on him. So I don't want your help. I don't need your help. I'm just, you can't help me. And how many times have we seen in movies and read in the newspaper how people don't trust the police, they don't want them. Of course, the guy was taking illegal drugs, sounded like speed, but he couldn't get very far. But there's an element of Asghar's character. Eleanor, could you mute your phone, please? Because we can hear you. Thank you. There's something comes out in the very first conversation with the addict. Did anybody notice an edge to Asghar, how he treated the addict? Who said that? Mona, what did you detect?
I was surprised that somebody in his position would say something like, well, it's your own fault. And he did not take a sympathetic, empathetic, or healing approach. He was full of blame.
Full of what?
Blame.
Okay, Barbara? Barbara, did you wave or just clear off your screen? Okay. Yeah, I didn't see this the first time. I think I did, but I didn't register with me. He's chastising somebody who's in desperate shape. And that's not, Susie, what you normally see in a kindergarten teacher. But we also saw the exact opposite from him, was the ultimate insensitivity, anticipating what the other person is going to think, feel, and do, and deal with it. But it's all unspoken. And I think that's what we all liked about this in-your-face technique that the film director used, is that we're in his head. So this brings me to a more filmmaker-y kind of question. Why are we in his head? Anybody want to take that on?
Sure. I think that we're in his head because that's what he wants us to experience, the same thing that Asghar is experiencing. And that's what draws me in, is that immediately it's not just a matter of you're watching people performing some action. What you're doing is you're in the action itself.
I think you're exactly right. Steve?
I actually think we're in his head because we're given no option. One of the things about having a movie, which unlike other movies, what's going on screen isn't informing you about what's going on. All you have is the guy's words. So it kind of forces you to be in his head because there's no alternative.
Right. There's
If
nothing
you're
else
going to
to
get
learn.
anything out of the movie at all.
Yeah, there's nothing, you're not allowed to see anything else. And Steve, why don't you chime in on that subject? Steve
Yeah,
Zimmerman.
I was going to say there's kind of an immediacy, the experience, the way you experience what he's going through. It's almost like you've got a window right into his mind, a visceral level. You can experience it. I thought it was pretty effective technique.
It really was. Now, I want to say something that you may not have noticed, but I think you'll realize in hindsight. We couldn't see the people on the other side of the phone conversation. The little girl, Matilda, we couldn't see Michael, or even in the car, we couldn't see his partner, Rashid. We couldn't see the dispatcher, the policeman. But why did we feel like we were there? It's because all we could see of them was what we heard of them. So it forces us, the human mind is really great in that we make pictures to satisfy our curiosity. So we probably imagined a 6-year-old girl in some kind of apartment when he was talking to Matilda. And again, it's this, just like the filmmaker didn't allow us to see anything else visually than the policeman. He didn't allow us to do anything but hear the plaintiffs. And the sound design, as it's called, was particularly effective in telling the scene and describing the scene. The other vehicles, when she's on the bridge, the vehicles below, far away, the policeman coming in to save Matilda, the police officer going into Oliver's room. These become pictures in our brain, even though we don't see a thing. So this is what the filmmaker does to engage us, so that we are there like Michael. If we just heard a voice and didn't really feel their performance, or it was too muffled, it wouldn't have had the same effect. It was a drama. You just couldn't see the other person that he was talking to. But we fill in the blanks. We create a story that accommodates what we're hearing. So this is, I think, brilliant technique in filmmaking. It's really thoughtful, extremely well done. Stephen Greenberg, hi. Unmute yourself, Steve, so we can hear you. Okay, when you come back. So does this make sense in hindsight, that you formed an impression of the other scenes that you couldn't see? Does that work for anybody? Because it's really, it had a big effect on me. And that's the first thing I look at. Why did I feel that way? Steve Zimmerman?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like a first person experience. if you
You're breaking up on us, Steve. It's your phone.
you're on call, you're in the call hearing at the other end of the line.
Yeah.
It almost forces you, like, it's like suddenly, well, how would I react in that situation?
Right.
What would I say?
And that's engagement. That's what filmmakers love to do, is to have the audience live through the eyes and the skin of the characters that are on screen. There's only one for us. So that's why we're engaged so deeply with him. And terrific technique, and well used throughout, and didn't get boring. But we'll come back to that later. We don't know what's going on with him personally in the beginning, do we? He calls his boss, Bo.
Can I just
Yes,
can I
Brad.
just throw something in at this point?
Yeah.
You know, he's not exactly alone on the screen, because we do see the other officers or the other people answering telephones through much of the movie.
Yeah.
Their reaction or lack of reaction is also very absorbing, I thought.
Yeah. Well, again, we want to know what else is going on around him. We do see other people, but we don't get to know them as characters. He apologizes to the guy at the next station. We don't know for what, but he says, I was mean to you, or I wasn't good to you for the last several period of time. And why is that? Why do you think he was unpleasant? It's a plot point. We hear it. This is why I brought up Bo, the boss. He calls him, and Bo says, listen, after the hearing, you'll go back to work and everything will be okay. What hearing? We don't know. And he takes a contemplative drink of water. And there are many moments in the film where you'd say, oh, nothing's going on. But if you watch him, he's thinking about what just transpired. It's easy to overlay what we know with what he's thinking about. Now, even, I don't know what the actor was thinking or feeling, but I suspect it was just a great performance reacting to those lines of dialogue that either somebody read to him on the set or that somebody was performing for him through the headset and then recorded that live. Frankly, the timing of the lines, one against the other, was uncanny. Those pauses were pregnant as hell, weren't they? And they weren't too long, because finally the silence forced somebody, either him or the people on the other side, to say something. But it wasn't an indulgent filmmaker's technique of boring us first before doing something. It was keeping us, as Susie said, on the edge of our seats. And he takes some Alka-Seltzer, right? Plop, plop, fizz, fizz. And then he drinks it later on in a second close-up. And he's still thinking about something else. We don't know. He does talk to Rashid briefly there. And there's something going on. Rashid's his partner. And then he gets the call, the first phone call from Eben. And he learns she's been abducted. And you see his training kick in when he knows how to question her, because he quickly goes to, does the person you're with know you're talking to me? No, is the answer. So then he changes his mode of questioning to yes or no, or, say something for the color of the car, or, pretend you're talking to your child. And that's his training kicking in. To his credit, he's doing it very well, because it's always effective, but it's never effective once. He has to repeat his phrases. So this patience is built into his training and perhaps his character too. And you see his intention, the intensity on his face. He really wants to help these people. The embassy official who gets held up by a prostitute in a red light district, let him stew for a few minutes before you send the car. He's not worth our time, right? The addict can't be helped. It's like those calls, the first three calls he gets. Oh, and the second call he gets is from a reporter. I want to talk to you about the case. So we only have the case, one word from her. And he says, you should have told me you were a reporter. And he hangs up. And his boss, Bo, says, after the hearing, you'll be better. That's all we know what's going on in his life. But again, those moments of contemplation, I think he's feeling the pressure before he talks to Eben. He's feeling the pressure of the day. And he says, yeah, it's really boring to be in this emergency unit. I want to be out in the field. Stephen.
Yeah, I was just going to add, you start to get sense impressions about the guy, though, right away. I mean, personally, I found he was kind of uncomfortable to watch him in that role in the call center, because he clearly seemed to have an anger management issue that I started.
What made you think? Tell us what made you think that way.
Well, the way he handled mostly the calls coming in and the way he'd react, he'd be judgmental, almost angry, almost indignant, almost don't waste my time, and sort of was jumping to some conclusions pretty frequently. But he was just emotional and intense,
yes,
and highly reactive.
Yes.
The other thing that made at least me a little uncomfortable about his style on the phone is, Brad mentioned there were other people in the room, which is true, but he was pushing them away. Yeah. So he was privatizing everything. He didn't want any help from anybody. There were at least 2 occasions when people said, "What's going on?" or
right.
Something to the effect of, "I help you in some way," and his answer was, "Nothing is going on," and no. So there might have been some openings there for some feedback from other people, right? No, but he was privatizing it. It was
right. That's a very, very good point.
But Steve, I just want to add, I think there was also some level of indifference from the other people in the room. And in the very final scene where they're all standing there mute as he walks out after making his confession, we're led to believe that there's a code of silence amongst the police.
Right. Well, but it was...
That was a private conversation with Ibn, wasn't it? They didn't know what he said.
No, I think it was in the public space. He leaves the dark room and goes into the public room with the police officers. And
of course, Rashid is willing to cover for him.
Yes, right.
And now the silence of the police at the end, where they too were not standing up,
right?
Or
but there's
vocalizing anything.
But everybody knew he killed a man. All the police officers, one police officer said, "Good luck tomorrow." Right. So it's not a secret that he's on trial. He's having a hearing for excessive force. But there is this sense that he just talked this woman down from a bridge, which is like a real triumph for an emergency call center person. So they were drawn into his drama too, but they add to the reality of the scene, but they're not important. And he certainly wasn't performing for them. But I want to call attention to the first call with Matilda, and he figures out what the phone number is, and he says to her, "Don't be afraid of us. Do you know what police do?" She says, "Yeah, I think so." She's 6 years old. He says, "We're your protectors." And that line lands on him pretty heavily. Police are protectors. What did he do? We don't quite know yet what he did. I knew because I'd seen the film before. But that was a very heavy moment. That happened around 15 minutes in. And we see his engagement with this particular drama. He calls the dispatcher and he finally gives her the license plate number of the van. And she wants to get off the phone. He says, no, what's your plan? And she says, "What do you mean, what's your plan?" And he kind of he fights with her. "No, you have to do something concrete. What are you going to do?" He's fighting the bureaucracy, just like he's going to be fighting the bureaucracy in the trial. I tried to do something. Now what he did was probably wrong. We know at the end, but at this point, it's like, it shows he's getting personally involved in this drama that's unfolding. It's not just a job to him. That's 25 minutes in. And then he calls Bo and says, please break into the apartment. I think Rashid says, do you want to talk to a new psychologist? So again, the film is just parceling out these little tidbits of what's going on with this guy. And they confirm for us that he's on edge. You know, we're not wrong for feeling that way. And court tomorrow is mentioned. And at the end, Rashid said, regards to Eleanor, right? And they hang up. And he says to a dead phone line, she moved out. So that's another thing. The guy's wife is leaving him because of the trauma of what he did to Joseph, the 19-year-old. So, you know, these police-involved shootings have a heavy fallout among the police officers too. One would hope they would. But this is a guy who's taking it really hard, despite his efforts to cover it up with his partner, Rashid, which we learn later. We still don't know yet. So that's another tensioning element the filmmakers put into the movie. You know, everything's withheld from us, but slowly, slowly, we get to understand what's happening with Ibn and what's happening with the hearing tomorrow and what's happening with Rashid. And we begin to put a picture together, just like we put a picture together of all the people talking to him on the phone. You see, we are like him. We're detectives. We're trying to sort things through. And the film is also dribbling out the information and making us deduce, you know, dear Watson, what the facts really are, what the causation is, where the drama is. So it's very well thought out. And I thought that shows how he's hiding from his best friend too, that his wife moved out, but he can't tell her. Then he has another moment of thought. And again, these moments of thought that he goes through are longer than normal, but they're not too long because he's reacting to what we heard. We need to decompress from the effects of the last conversation. And there's a little editing in there where they cut to a different angle on him, but his performance always seems to be specific to what was just said. And it's just so remarkable. Then he calls Ibn and he has to hang up. He gets a call. There's a brawl in a bar or something. And he's abused again by some caller, says, you people aren't going to help us. And he gets hung up on again. So he calls Ibn back. No, he calls Michael. And Michael doesn't know that Asghar knows about what happened at the house. So he says, can you go back to the house and check on them? He's very sly. I mean, this is clever. He doesn't say, I know you've abducted your ex-wife. He says, your kids are alone at the house. Can you go check in on them? And of course he says no, and that's where he spills the beans. Oh no, he hangs up in that conversation. And then he calls Rashid his partner who's been drinking. That's another sign of the pressure on Rashid. Rashid is a witness at the hearing tomorrow, and he's afraid we can't pull it off. Aha. They've concocted a story about whatever the cause of the hearing was, so that neither one of them will go to jail or be dismissed or action will be taken. And that's all you hear. But then he talks, this I thought was also beautiful. He talks to Rashid, his partner, the way he's talking Matilda down from her panic, and the way he's talking Ibn down from her anxiety in the van. It's the same line of questioning, the same reassurance, the calmness, and the same pauses followed by something meaningful, even if it's just an allusion to something. Silence produces responses. People want to fill in the blanks. Even these characters, just like us as viewers, the characters want to fill in the blanks of the silences he leaves. And when the silence gets to be too long, he says something. When it gets to be too long for him. So this is a pretty fundamental, the tension those characters feel, or the tension we feel, or we would feel. How many of us have been in a conversation with a relative, probably a child, really tense moment, something serious has happened, maybe it's the loss of a relative, and you don't know what to say to each other, but you must talk to each other. Each of you has that need. Let's put it that way. So I liken it to that, where there's an urge to spill, to vent, to share with somebody you know. Certainly Matilda wants somebody she knows on the other end of the phone. She's scared. She's 6 years and 9 months, and she's a charming character, but we feel her. And at one point she says, please don't go. And Ibn says, please don't go. So, this guy is being father confessor. He has on many different hats, but he knows he has to please his audience. He's not a performer here. He's working the crowd, though, so that he can help them succeed when they can't help themselves. So then his temper lashes out again. Then this is really interesting. Police arrive at the home. They see blood on her, and that's the first time he realizes there's blood on Matilda. So the other police officer doesn't know what to do, and he pressures him. You got to look through the house. You got to look through the house. And finally, he comes upon Oliver, and he's very shaken by it. That performance was great. He doesn't say, "Oh my God, somebody cut open his belly." He doesn't say that. But she's dead. How do you know she's dead? Go check. She's dead. And then there's a long dolly in on the close-up to Askar. He's getting the worst news possible in this drama. Murder has been committed of an infant.
Can I make a comment?
Of course.
My comment is, first of all, when you're saying now he found out that there's a murder, do you remember at the beginning of the conversation that he had with Matilda, that he said, go in the room, because she said, I'm so scared, I'm scared.
Yeah.
And he used the technique for her to go into the room with Oliver and comfort Oliver. She didn't run out and say, Oliver's all bloody, he's dead.
I'm not sure she made it into the room. He says, go sit with him, be quiet, and you won't waken him.
Well, wouldn't she have seen that he?
We don't know. Maybe he's in a crib that's enclosed.
Okay, that's my first observation. I look for snags.
Yeah, of course you do. That's the human mind at work.
The
We fill in the
second-
void.
The
And
second major snag to me was
I got the
Michael was, well, why didn't he say, I'm taking her back to the hospital where she belongs?
Okay, let me answer that. I'll come right back to you after Karen Ellison.
No, I was just gonna say, the father told the girl not to go in the room.
Right,
So she had not seen the baby.
right.
I don't think she saw the baby till the policeman told her to go be with her brother.
I don't
That's
think
when
you
she
saw him
went
then.
into the room, probably, and got bloody. That was just the way I interpreted, because before that, she said, my father said not to go in there.
Oh,
So it was
Okay.
like the policeman actually encouraged her to go in there, not realizing she was gonna see this
Yeah,
horrible.
he didn't know there'd be blood there for her to
Well,
get.
yeah.
And then
So
she
anyway.
comes out, you're saying, Karen, and then the social workers come in and they see she's got blood on her. Okay, Susie, where were we?
Jim, yeah, I also.
Yeah, Jeff. Go ahead.
So I'm a little surprised that we haven't talked about his phone calls to his ex-wife, or he's calling her at very early in the morning, 2 or 3 in the morning, to talk to his child, and she's saying, you have to stop doing this.
Right.
You have to stop calling.
Mhm.
I think in many ways he's cracking up
Yeah.
through the early part of the film. He's losing it.
Mhm.
And it's working with this case that ultimately gets him to a place of redemption.
Yes,
The
yes.
end.
Let's save that for the end, but I think you're absolutely right. And that call is important. He's got so much going on in his life. He's reaching out for a protector, for somebody to help him, and there is nobody, because he's pushed his ex-wife too far, or his current wife. Good point. I'm glad you brought that up. If there's nobody else, let's get back to Susie's question, your second point. Susie?
The second point was how, well, obviously there would be no plot if Michael said, I
Oh,
didn't
okay.
do anything to the kid. I'm taking my wife back to the mental institute.
Okay.
We didn't find out that she was,
Yeah,
she
okay.
had left there.
There are two answers to that. The mechanical answer is he's an ex-felon, remember? He has a record. He's afraid of being thrown back in jail. And when Asghar doesn't know the real truth, he says he'll go to prison, you know, and then later, very soon after that, he hangs up. So that's the mechanics of Michael's reasoning. When it comes out that the baby is dead or was attacked by Eben, Michael says, nobody can help us. You've never helped us before. She's been in the hospital and, you know, nothing's helped. So I just took matters into my own hands. He's taking her back to the hospital. So in a way, he's deranged too. He is distressed, and but he doesn't want to kill her. He just wants her back in the hospital where she was before. He knows the full story of this woman. We don't. You see, so that's his explanation for not, making Asghar's job easier. And again, there's a little moment. Asghar calls Bo by accident, his boss, because he's reaching out. There are a lot of people. There's Rashid, there's Bo, there's Eben, there's the dispatcher. I think it's kind of cute that, he has to avoid the call with his ex-boss, and he hangs up. And then he tells her to take a brick and smash Michael in the head or somewhere. And it's very interesting that his body has been kind of calm, but there's a close-up where he's calm while he's waiting. But before he makes this call, when he's telling her what to do, he's shaking. There's a shot of his fingers shaking on the desktop. So once he gives a prescriptive order, he's just waiting for it to happen. And that's a policeman doing their job, but he realizes he's asking her to do something very brave. So that's at the 1 hour mark. And she's not sure she can do it. And that's where he uses another trick that you school teachers out there know. What's your favorite food? Pork sausage. I don't eat pork and I'm not Muslim. Thank you very much. Then he says, what do you like to do? And he gets her distracted from the crisis at hand to something totally pleasant. She talks about taking her kids to the aquarium. And we talk about how Matilda likes the turtles, and I push Oliver in the stroller behind her. What do you like about it? So again, he's distracting her, he's pushing her deeper into this fond memory. And you see how her mind is working. She calms down. He's being effective, and he's calming too. And she says, it's blue silence. I like that. It's comforting. And he's comforted too. So the whole tension of that phone call is knocked down on both their parts. It's a lovely, nuanced scene. That's what this film does so well. It makes big points out of little points because they are important. And then what does she do? I like you, she says to him. He says, well, I like you too. And then she says, I want to invite you to the aquarium with us. Oh my God. In the middle of all this, but it means he's very successful. He took her to a place where she could function. And then she admits to the snakes. The snakes. He says he has an upset stomach. And she says, yeah, like Oliver, he had snakes in his stomach, and that stops him. And it's a total, change in tenor of the movie. And she admits what she did. And he is just stunned. This is great performance. So how do I take this in? I'm trying to protect the kids, I'm trying to protect her from Michael. And I just realized that no, Michael needs protection from her. And I told her to hit him on the head with a brick. But he realizes that she's a threat to herself too. So she hits him on the head, and that realization happens while we're hearing her struggle with him. Still stunned, Rashid calls and he finds the documents, the invoice from the mental hospital. And this is traditional storytelling. Askar looks at the map and he sees the psych center is very close to the location where the cell phone tower is that picked up her call. And this is, Susie, this is where, you know, he calls Michael and he says, I'm trying to help you. And Michael says, fuck that. Nobody's ever been able to help us. Forget it. And, you know, hangs up on him. So he calls Eben and all he gets is a phone message. And then what, Steve Miller? He has a tantrum, breaks the lamp, smashes a screen. He's furious. And then I want to call attention to the filmmaking there. He recedes from one end of the room and he walks into a red light. He's lit in red. And he's in that room by himself. It's much darker. And all we see, the red light is coming from the on light above the computer monitor. That's the motivation for it. And this is his deep, dark moment of confronting his crime, his own crime, I think. And for about the next 6 minutes, that's when we hear it. He tells Rashid, don't lie if you can't. And Rashid's saying, he's thinking about the trial. And Ibn calls and he says, I fired the shot. I lied to you. Wait, am I getting that mixed up? He goes into blue light after Ibn calls. And he confesses to her, I killed him. And she says to him, but you didn't mean to. That's a very loaded line, because we learn later that in that conversation, he says, I didn't have to shoot him, but I did. Why? Because I wanted to remove something bad. He's looking for a word. He's fed up with the evil in the world. Maybe his wife left him before this happened. You know, maybe that was a causation of his excessive force. We don't know. But this is a man who is fed up with all he's seen as a police officer, all the pain, the misery, the crime, the cruelty, the gore. And he'd had it, you know, police stress, PTSD from all the thousands of stops he must have made in his career. Right? And he broke and he shot the kid. And I think he's realizing that in this deep, dark night of the soul. He also takes the blame later for her being on the bridge. That's where he says, I've had enough. I wanted to remove something bad. And she said, yes, snakes. So she's equating what she did to her son to what he did to the boy. I knew you didn't mean to. And then he comes back and he says, but Michael and Matilda still love you. He's giving her something to live for. I think that's it's the beginning of the redemption that Steve Miller referred to, or Brad did. And she says, you're a good man. And then she hangs up. And then he's scared because he thinks she jumped off the bridge. But he calls dispatch and he gets the news that she came down. And that's when the coworkers stare at him. He paces and then pauses when he walks past his coworkers, and he goes into that hallway. And I want to throw this open for discussion. Who do we think he goes to the end of the hall, right? What's at the end of the hall?
A door.
And what's the door made of? Glass. It's light.
What's it made of?
It's glass. It
Oh,
emits
glass.
light. He's walking to the light through a dark hall. He's coming out of the darkness into light, out of the red light into blue. So my question to all of you is, who do we think he called as he raises his cell phone to his ear before it cuts to black? Anybody want to try that one on? No, you're going to make me say it? Marina knows. Marina knows everything.
Sorry, I was I had to answer the door and I didn't hear the end of the conversation.
Okay.
I raised my hand a long time ago.
I'm
So
sorry.
may I say what I planned
Yeah,
to
go
say,
ahead. Yes,
even
go.
though I missed the last few words? So my perception was that the policeman gave two wrong suggestions. One, when he told the girl to go hug her brother, and another when he told the woman to hit Michael with a brick, because both recommendations were wrong.
Right.
And in Michael's statement that you never helped us, I take the side of the families of people with mental illness, because it's very often that the police come and they don't do anything, and they cannot do anything, and the people with mental illness still go on, and the families are still suffering. So
Right.
Michael is taking it into his own hands, even though he's risking his freedom, but he's doing the only thing he can possibly think of, because asking for police help will not bring him anywhere. His daughter is not supposed to interact with him. His daughter can only remember his phone number, but she's not supposed to write it down, because it's quite possible that the mother has all the parental rights and he has none, even though she has a mental illness.
Right.
But the society is so protective of freedoms that sometimes it's overboard, and the people with mental illness do not have the same safeguards as the people with criminal history.
Right, right. It's a very good observation. And, you know, Asghar isn't perfect, but when he says, go stay with your brother, he doesn't know. He doesn't know.
No, I understand. He doesn't know.
It's well intended, you know, but then this is when it all happens, when he finds out what the real story is. The question I asked the group was, maybe you can answer this. At the end of the film, he's walking down that dark hallway towards a door where there's light streaming in through it. And he takes out his cell phone and he makes a call. What is that call about? Susie and then David.
I think that he called his buddy who was going to be meeting him in court, so that he wouldn't be shocked, because I think that he was going to turn himself in, as far as admit that he killed the kid and he didn't want his friend to lie for him and perjure himself in the courtroom. So I think he called him.
Okay, David.
Well, if not that, I was thinking it might be he's calling his boss to basically admit what happened, so that they don't even have to perhaps not even go forward with a hearing.
Well, they're both the same purpose. He's had a change of heart. He doesn't want to go through their plan to deceive the people at the hearing. He's essentially turning himself in. And the long walk down the hall to light at the end of the tunnel, I think, is a brilliant visual metaphor for what he's doing. And remember, the guy spent most of the last third of the film in the dark room. It's not a film that needs its symbols, but it uses them well. For me, that can be unspoken as well. I'm so glad that both of you agree with me that that's what you saw. Marina?
I think he's already admitted it because the conversations of the emergency operators are recorded. So he's already said that into the recording when he was when he was saving the woman. So he's just following up on what he's already done.
Yeah, except nobody knows. You'd have to go back and listen to it. So, Mona?
Actually, I noticed that when he makes his confession, it's one of the only scenes in which he's actually facing the other people. So the other workers are in the better lit room. He's in the private room.
Yeah.
He makes this confession, in a sense, in a public way.
Right.
I did not interpret it as there being a code of silence. I just thought they were stunned, if they could even hear it. It's possible that they couldn't hear it, but I didn't. I think somebody previously said they thought there was a code of silence among the police. I didn't sense that. I found it very interesting that it's the only time when he's talking, when he's actually facing them.
Yeah.
And he acknowledges truth. And I thought certainly the whole hallway thing is about the truth shall set you free.
Yeah.
I thought he might be calling the reporter, the one who had tried to talk to him earlier, and he had pushed her away.
Yeah, the facts don't matter here. You know, the point is we get his frame of mind.
Actually, I want to add one minor thing that he doesn't take into account, and he has another moral dilemma that we're not talking about. His partner has already gone on record and lied for him.
Right.
So to now change his story, he's maybe liberating himself, having, seen that that's wrong, but he's putting his partner, who really went out on a limb for him, in harm's way.
Right. And he even says that in one conversation. I lied for you before, so I can't change my story. And that's why he's drinking so much, because he's tormented too. Arthur Schwimmer had something to say.
Jim, I took a very simpler view of it. Since this was at the end when he is starting to redeem himself, I thought he was calling his estranged wife to start his life anew, if he were able. That was my take on it.
You know what? There's no right or wrong here. It's like it all points to him reaching out to somebody else and dealing with his own acts. He's coming clean. Betty?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that he did make a point. He had been in the room by himself, and he chose to go into the other room when he was talking to the woman on the bridge. So it was almost as if he wanted everybody to hear his confession.
Yeah. But they knew he shot somebody already, but he just did it because I could. He even says that. Why did I do it? Because I could. I wanted to remove something bad. So, we can write that script if we want. Jeffrey?
Yeah, maybe you made this point, but I want to clarify. I mean, in my mind, there are both of the stories are interlinked in the sense that we sense that he was a very good cop. And he knew his stuff, but clearly he had a kind of breakdown when he killed that kid. In the same way that the woman was basically you could tell she was a good person, but in a moment of illness, she killed her own child. And so I think that their stories intersect completely at that point, which is why he can then, he sees the light, he sees what happened, and therefore he can then admit it to himself and admit it to others.
Good point. I was thinking that he's just experienced a trauma, the failure of his own judgment, even though he talked her down from the bridge. He lived through this traumatizing experience with Eben, with Matilda, with Michael. And after trauma is removed, there's this moment of relief, release. Things can happen. You know, you're so vulnerable in that moment that maybe he decided he could let down his guard and, you know, change his story at the hearing, despite the, you know, it indicting Rashid, his partner. So it's funny how it takes something as severe as what we witnessed to get him to tell the truth, you know, but that's how we work as people. It's sobering. You know, we need as a couple of slaps upside the head to really, you know, face the world we've created for ourselves sometimes. But for me, the key line in the film was, I wanted to remove something bad. It's like, he's angry at the world. He was angry at the world before he encountered the young boy. And he took it out on him. You know, it was an error of judgment. Betty.
Yeah, I think too, it was also, we haven't really talked about too much about the Ibn's husband, Michael, but I think they were showing the complexity of the people that, you know, that there were, you know, here was this person, we don't know what he did, but he was had been in jail, and so he was a criminal, and yet he was very empathic. He wanted to help his wife, and he said she doesn't know that she killed our son. And here he was crying because his son had died, and he says, but she doesn't know. And I didn't want to tell her. I didn't want her to be hurt. I wanted to help her. So here's this criminal who has this really kind and empathic side. And I think that was part of also what made him feel so guilty. Like, who is, you know, who's right, who's wrong, who's good, who's bad. So I thought there were just a lot of complexities in all the characters.
There was, and you know, it's a tribute to the movie, and you know, it's one of it's the kind of film I like to bring to you because it asks these questions. You know, we don't ask ourselves these questions enough, so we can live in the character's skin for 90 minutes, you know, and then talk about it and maybe have more perspective on ourselves and our relationships. Any more comments on who? Brad, unmute. Unmute yourself, Brad.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think this was an insignificant detail that the location of the hospital was in Elsinore. And of course, Elsinore is Hamlet. We're in Hamlet. And when we're in Hamlet, we're in paralysis.
Yes.
And he suffered from paralysis in terms of coming to terms with what he had done. That was clear when he had that telephone call from the journalist. He didn't know how to respond. So at the end, when he takes out that phone, I don't think it's important that we know who he's going to call.
Right.
What's important is that he's going to call somebody.
Exactly.
He's going to take an action, and he's moved from paralysis to action.
Very good. Very good analysis. There was somebody else I wanted to single out. It's time to start to wrap it up, unless people want to discuss it more. It makes me want to see more films that this director made. And I haven't had time to research. What I wanted to share with you is that this film was remade with Jake Gyllenhaal in 2021, directed by Antoine Fuqua, who is now a big action director, and they're quite good at that. And if you want to teach yourself a lot about nuance in movie making and how to speak the unspeakable, or speak without speaking, let's put it that way, the unspoken can speak to us with a good actor, you should see the remake. if you saw it on your own, you'd say, well, that didn't really get my blood cooking, but it was interesting, great concept. But what they did so poorly was to build up the drama of the hearing the next morning. It's a very literal minded. They even had the set decoration was the same. The tantrum was the same with the lamp, and it's like almost shot for shot, except that they tried to open it up. It's very American style filmmaking. Did everything right mechanically except the underneath, the soul of it. And compared to this film, it's anemic. Gyllenhaal did his best, but in true American style, they decided to let the baby live at the end of that. And it's like the two movies are just spinning in my head. And it will, for those of you who like international films, they really have it on us in terms of going deep inside and under our skins. That's why I talk all the time about the Chinese and the Japanese and the Koreans and the Indians, especially. They have a way of articulating what people are feeling without saying it. And I asked an Indian student that I had, why is this? And he agreed that Asian films are much more understated. And he said, you Americans are very expressive and demonstrative, and we're much more demure. In our families, we won't say anything to somebody's face for fear of hurting their feelings. Oh. Right? So we have learned how to say intimate things without saying them. We can get our feelings across without expressing them literally. And, I don't know if that's true. That's just his opinion, but it sure made sense to me with all the Asian films I see. Now, some aren't that way. We saw White Tiger, about the poor country boy who becomes a mobster on his own, or he kills a mob boss's son and becomes a mogul, but he treats his drivers better. That's certainly an American style movie. And it's certainly not understated at all, either dialogue wise or action wise. And that was made, in Delhi, I think. But then there are films that we've seen. Maybe you remember The Photograph, shot in India, about the lower caste young man who takes pictures at a tourist site and meets a middle class woman and asks her to masquerade as his fiancée because his grandmother's coming to town and expects him to present a bride. And it's so well done. And that's Ritesh Batra. And he did The Sense of an Ending, which we also saw, which he shot in London, which is as English as can be. It's all about cold upper class private school kids and a traumatic thing that lives with three of them for the rest of their lives. So I'd say if you like foreign films, this is one reason why. If you've not been able to articulate that, ask yourself, do you feel more for the characters? Do you like them more? Are you more involved in the story or the plot, or do they challenge you more personally? We have a way of, mechanically making things great for eye appeal. And, but we short ourselves on, it's called emotional intelligence, except for Meryl Streep, who can do no wrong, of course. But, and there are others, Kimberly's shaking her head. There are some people who get to the truth. Robin Williams did. Oh my God, in his movies, Dead Poets Society and the other one. And there are others, and even the more stagey actors like Richard Burton, or Sir Michael Redgrave. These guys, they were much more formal, but they could do it. Although they had the benefit of great dialogue to chew the scenery with. So, this.
Jim, can I say something real quick?
Yeah, sure.
I saw both versions, and
good.
I thought of him as kind of a hot-headed guy, the hot-headed, know-it-all cop, and that. But he seemed to have softness with the little girl and the woman. But it was with men, he seemed to have no patience, he didn't want to give them any slack or anything. And I thought when the woman said that she saw snakes in her child, he saw that, and they were really her snakes in her head. They weren't in the child, obviously. But I think when he killed that kid, he saw snakes in his head that wasn't in that kid. And I also thought it was very interesting. I watched the original one last night, and morning. And with the whole thought of the cop who went too far and killed a kid, of course, if you're watching it in the US and being a Black person, you see that whole cop thing as a different story. It changes the story. So it is almost better with the Danish version because you're not having to deal with that. You get to deal with the other issues.
Yeah. I want to say one thing about American police and the whole Black Lives Matter issue triggered by the George Floyd. What was it, George?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can't breathe. And that awful cop sat on his neck for 9 minutes. This has brought into the press since that happened that we are sending policemen out on psychiatric calls that they're not equipped to deal with at great expense. And there's a move now, I don't know how it's going in LA, to, oops.
Jim, I can see you fine.
I can't see any of you. My screen just went away. Let me see if I can find the Zoom icon.
I can see you just
there we
fine.
go. Okay.
And here
I'm
you
sorry. I accidentally touched that. So this business about defund the police, which is like a knee-jerk reaction, has given some people the idea, let's just spend the money a little differently. Let's send police out less on domestic disturbance calls, and we'll send trained psychological counselors out with maybe a lesser armed detective, and they can call for backup if they need it. So, and the beauty of the show Cops is I never saw an episode where they encountered a truly deranged person. It was always somebody who was, on drugs, but somewhat conscious, or somebody who was just trying to lie their way out of something. And the police, were performed brilliantly and thoughtfully there. But when somebody is in a psychotic break, things can happen. Police can mistake a toy gun for a real gun or a cell phone for a gun. Disasters happen. And this is what happened to that guy. And Kimberly, maybe because the guy he killed was Black, the young man, it aroused something in him. I think it was more blind justice. I'm fed up of dealing with lowlifes like you, whether the kid was or not isn't important, but he took it out on that one victim. So, we really have to rethink how we treat each other. It's not like we have to treat everybody like criminals, and we can afford to treat some criminals like better people than they are until we discover they're not. It's my feeling, my progressive feelings about it. Any more comments? I'd like to move. I'm so glad you saw it. What did you think of the emotional tenor of the movie? For me, it lacks soul. Excuse me, Kimberly.
Second one, yeah.
Yeah.
It was all nice and tidy. It redeemed him in another way, and yeah.
So Jake Gyllenhaal is a really good actor. But again, movie productions have a spirit, an ethos, and an aesthetic. And I blame the director. I mean, it's just, that's how we chose to do it, and it wasn't as effective. Okay, good news. We have a happy movie to see. Everybody's getting out their pens and pencils.
How did that happen?
Yeah, okay, so imagine that. I found something really charming that I'm sure you're going to love. I think our next day is November 2nd. Yeah, Thursday. It's next week. And this is a new film that was in the theaters very briefly. It stars Ben Kingsley and Roberta Harris or something, and a woman from Saturday Night Live years ago. So she's an older woman in this. It's called Jules. And it's about a spaceship that lands in Ben Kingsley's backyard in a small town. I'm not kidding, And there is an alien creature who comes out, and the world doesn't know where he is yet. So Ben Kingsley takes him in and lives with him for X number of weeks until his friends, these two women friends, stop by and they discover what it is. And the three of them, they engage in an effort to save Jules, which he has named the alien, who doesn't speak. As far as we know, he has no genitals either, but it doesn't matter. His name is Jules, and he's very sweet, but he has powers. He has special powers, telekinetic powers. That's not what it's about. Ben Kingsley is in the early stages of Alzheimer's, and his friends are always concerned about him. He appears at a town council meeting talking about nonsense stuff, and must have changed the name of the town or something. But the ethos of that film is just one of total tenderness, and it's really about something not about aliens. But I don't want to blow my cover for next week. You're really going to like it. It's on Amazon. You'll have to pay for this one, but it came and went. It was at the Laemmle. It's one of those small pictures. It's a gem. It's just one of those things. You're going to love it, and you're going to tell all your friends and grandchildren to see it because it's just so charming. And Ben Kingsley is always great. And for him to play a kind of confused man who still has something to say that's important, and he fights the good fight for Jules, it's sweet. And we'll have fun with it. So at last, I don't have to say it's going to be this or that. It's going to be Jules. I feel I owe it to you after this string of heavy hitters.
Is it Jules, Jules, or Jewels? No, Jules, like Jules Schwartz from the deli. Okay. Can you just tell us how often the group meets?
We do 2 Thursdays a month.
Okay.
But they're two next, they're on the 2nd and the 16th because of the Thanksgiving holiday. I think, yeah. Oh no, I can't do it on the 16th. 2nd or maybe the 9th. If you people have, that would be 2 weeks in a row.
3 weeks.
Do you want to do it on the 23rd? It's, Thanksgiving Thursday, a week ahead. Oh, sorry, that's Thanksgiving Day.
Better. I would vote for the 9th.
So the 2nd and the 9th, I'll see what I can do. I'll see what
Can you tell us the name of the movie for that one also?
No, I can't. Come
Okay.
on, one at a time. But there. I saw a film that you can see yourselves. It's called The Burial. Burial. Jamie Foxx and Tommy Lee Jones. And Jamie Foxx is the lawyer who's trying to save a legacy for Tommy Lee Jones's family, who they own a chain of funeral homes, and the Canadian concern tries to weasel in and buy them out. And it's part comedy, but it's really an intimate drama that's a feel-good movie. It's just, I don't think there's enough there for us to talk about, but you'll like it. And it's on Netflix, I think. The Burial. And that'll keep you busy, I suppose, for a while. But I'm so glad you like this film. It just goes to show you that films are magic. They do stuff to us. We see things differently, but we're kind of affected the same way sometimes. So that's what we do here. Oh, I want to say something to our new guests as well before I lose them. Please send me your email, and I'll make sure you get an email from me before every screening. My email is Jim Ruxin. It's at the bottom of my window. One word, at yahoo.com. Betty, you're already on the list. So is Bob.
Okay.
But the others are not. Lori, Ellen, LH, Aaron, Robert Olish. We hope you liked tonight's discussion. This is how they go, and you're welcome to change us if you can, but join us, and because we value your input and we could use the fresh blood. Not that we're boring, but it'd be nice to have new people to bounce ideas off of. So see you next Thursday, the November 2nd. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome. Bye.
Good night, Jim.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.